Yeah, yeah. I don't know. I don't know why it was had you backstage because it didn't have you on my end. Clearly,
I don't
it
know.
thought
Maybe
something was
maybe
wrong.
I clicked. Maybe I clicked last week's on stage.
Maybe I don't know. Okay, so welcome to Talking Niagara, everybody, and we already had Chris Simone in the background saying good morning, great to be here, and 83 subs that's getting there. Yeah, that's getting there, my friend. 83 subs. Okay. Is this a new venture of yours, Chris? Okay, loud and clear. There we go. You see?
All right. Thanks, Chris. Thanks for tuning in.
That was a long weekend.
Well, it was pretty good actually. I had a nice family meal over at my sons, and all three sons were there. That was really nice. I don't see that too often anymore. All three of my boys get together, and it was one Elizabeth saga. And my oldest boy he stayed here a night, and him and I hung out the next day. So that was pretty good. I don't see my oldest boy enough in
Yeah.
person anyway. I talked to him on phone and all that, but that was really cool to have that. So I did all right for my weekend. What about you?
Well, my my son's not here anymore, so we didn't do anything.
Where's your son?
He's off around the world.
Is he?
Yeah, as he went off last about a year ago now.
Oh, where's he going?
Oh, various places.
Oh, good man. Is it for
Yeah,
work or pleasure?
pleasure.
Well, he's
He's
got to do
given
that. He's got to do
he's
the
given
Hajj
up
sooner.
work.
He's
He's
got to do the
given up
Hajj
work.
sooner or later, doesn't he?
He's given up work.
Oh, he giving up work?
Yeah, he's
Well,
decided he's going to retire.
well, that's nice if you can
Something
do
I
it.
can't afford to do.
Well, he's got to go on the Hajj one of these times, right? Has he been on the Hajj yet?
Um, I no, not to my knowledge. All right, so good morning, Peter Baker. Welcome to the show. Good morning, Mike Cushman. Welcome to the show, and of course, Chris Simone. All right, so a BC woman has been charged with terrorism-related offences for traveling to Syria to join ISIS. Now, this is something she traveled there back in I think 2012, 2013.
Yeah, she's well, actually, she was saved. Basically, she was in a. This is a woman. Let's now the title, an extremist expert says Hamilton board Kimberly Pullman needs help. The RCMP says she's at risk to be a lone wolf terrorist. This is now we talked about gambleaholics last or problem gamblers last week, and there's a certain segment of our population that can get roped into something like this, can be brainwashed into helping ISIS. Now, this is a woman of I think she's of Dutch origin. I'm not so sure, but definitely a European from European descent, and she somehow got in it her idea that she has to go and marry a guy from ISIS or ISIL. And that's what she did. She left Canada, married a guy from got involved with a terrorist, ISIS terrorist, later got captured, stayed in prison for a while. The Canadian government got her back out on her to uh, put conditions on her so that she could come back into Canada. But
But
they're
she
talking
was
here about how that she is now vulnerable to become a lone wolf terrorist because she is easily manipulated by the brainwashing techniques that they have. She actually married one or two different ISIL terrorists. It's insane. But the reason why this, go ahead.
She was repatriated in October 22. She was repatriated to Canada and arrested on arrival, having spent 3 years at Al Roj detention center for families of ISIS fighters in northern Syria. Right, so she was, that she was already spent time in prison in Syria.
Yes, so she's anyway. This whole article is about how this person, this woman, he's in her 40s, can eventually become a lone wolf terrorist. Now, I don't know in this if they've lost track of her or not, but the RCMP went through the reports and discovered her radicalization time in mid-2014, extending to the summer of 2015. And then she up and left and said she was going to be visiting, told family she was going to be visiting Austria, then headed to Syria and Turkey. She became an ISIL bride, Islamic State of the Levant, a bride. Then she told her family, you live in Dar al-Kufr, land of disbelievers. I don't live in Canada anymore. You'd love it here. Somehow, can you imagine? And then all she does is she learns how to use a gun, carries a knife, and then services the ISIL fighters by taking care of them, feeding them, taking care of their wounds. What happened to this woman? Why? What in her makeup, in her mind? Now, this is not the first Canadian. We knew about a couple of young men already, Canadians, not of Arabic descent, not of any Muslim descent at all, that went off, and Americans too, that went off to fight for either Al Qaeda or ISIS. There was a couple of Canadians that ended up in Algeria when they attacked a small oil refinery place in southern Algeria, and a couple of Canadian boys, or at least one Canadian boy, got killed there, maybe two. And he think he had a Slavic name. It was like a name from Eastern Europe, but anyway, he was not brought up a Muslim. What radicalized these people? What does it? We talked about how gambling got into people's heads, and it was a kind of a sort of a disorder they had to fight. And in this case, what happens to these people? How do they become radicalized? How are they vulnerable to brainwashing like that? That's my biggest curiosity here. And now this woman is at risk of being a lone wolf. In other words, she might be the one that plants a bomb someplace. She might be the one that maybe puts a bomb on and blows herself up in a subway or something. What is it?
Well, at the moment,
ordinary everyday person somehow got radicalized by this. So you can imagine the power of the radicalization, brainwashing techniques they have for Muslim kids and Arab kids. If some of our people who are not exposed to Islam at all, or radical Islam, and then get somehow talked into going all the way over there, even women. Seriously, what is it, the power of brainwashing?
Yeah. Well, basically she lives in Squamish, BC. She wears electronic supervisory equipment, and she's on an order not to leave the province. She has no access to driving a vehicle except for an e-bike, and she cannot communicate with anybody suspected of being involved with terrorism.
Yeah, these are the conditions that they put on her to bring her back.
Yeah.
However, they still have to keep an eye on her because she still has, as the RCMP said, still has, and after an investigation and other psychiatrists, you can imagine they had all kinds of shrinks looking inside her brain and thinking, okay, she still is at risk of being a lone wolf terrorist. It's absolute madness. And I think her son in the end said that like she has a risk, like she would do something terrible because I think trying to get down here to what her son says. It goes across her whole history. Is she a manipulator or a victim? And it goes on, or uh, it says, with respect, in this respect, danger, the RCMP find common ground, although differing in collateral damage, because one, they have this person called Speckhard, who is a shrink, basically. When the RCMPs interviewed Pullman's son, he told them would not be surprised if a mother strapped a bomb to her chest. And completely vulnerable to, and the RCMP quotes her children calling their mother volatile, a manipulator, and psychological liar who is easily brainwashed. That easily brainwashed thing, when you can somehow convince yourself that any brutal act of terrorism is okay. What is that? Do we have? I don't know. I'm just putting it out there because she's not the only one. We have young men. We have young men in this country constantly being barraged by the brainwashing techniques of ISIL or ISIS and Al Qaeda or whatever else, and they go enthusiastically off to war to commit atrocities. I think that's okay.
Yeah, but also remembering back to the title of this article that she needs help.
Yes. How do you give her help, though?
Yeah. Well, that's a fair question. You know, I suspect that she needs to be deprogrammed. And who better than the government to do that?
Well, after the Second World War, the Allies took a great deal of care to denazify the population, particularly the soldiers and stuff. And some of those soldiers, old or Nazis, had been in Nazis for a long time, became denazified. It took them a while. I remember watching one that was interviewed. He began as a brown shirt and then later on got into the Wehrmacht, bought all the Nazi stories, was very enthusiastic about the extremism of Nazism. And it took him a while to be able to be free of that kind of thinking. But there is a case where the brainwashing happened on a national level. This is a brainwashing that kind of overlaps the areas and somehow attracts people with no cultural relevance at all to the people that are brainwashing them. I know there's probably lots and lots of Muslim kids in the country now who look at that stuff and may have fallen into the the BS, especially now when they're murdering tens of thousands of people in Gaza, willy-nilly, bombing them, burning them to death, like what happened on the weekend there when 4 people were horribly burned right outside of a hospital. Little children being burned up, one with an IV still stuck in his arm. And, so when you look at something like that, and if you're a Muslim and you're supposed to sort of defend other Muslims, I could see a lot of young men, getting angry and thinking they want to do something and then go off and hitch up with a brutal outfit like ISIL, lose their minds. But how do you lose your mind to brainwashing like that? How do you lose your ability of right and wrong with inside of brainwashing?
Mike basically says allow her back here and taxpayers' money for her incarceration. Leave her at the place she supported, is what Mike's saying. So now Canada's harboring a terrorist.
Well, she is a Canadian, so she has rights to be a Canadian. Some of the Brits
British,
turn
well, a
their back
couple of
on their
British
particular what?
subjects, well, British subjects have had their British citizens stripped
Yeah,
because of this.
but I think we have a responsibility to our own citizens.
I
Like we
believe
don't
Britain
like
does as well.
this is a mental illness, and we don't. We keep an eye on other people with mental illnesses. She's got some sort of mental illness, some kind of quirk. Remember, she was a normal person at one time. Do we turn our back on them? But she's potentially dangerous. Well, so is a mentally unstable person very dangerous. I mean, they let the guy out of jail that cut the person's head off in a bus.
Well, at one time, Ottawa human rights lawyer Lawrence Greenspan had actually represented her at one point, right? But she's been in Canada for 2 years and she's been under very strict conditions, according to Greenspan. And to his knowledge, she's not violated any of those conditions.
Yes, but the RCMP just says that she's at risk, and they juxtapose the RCMP's conclusions about her with this psychologist Stackard, whatever her name is. I just mentioned it. I just messed it up again. But what was her name? Speckard. So that in the article, it sort of compares what the RCMP has discovered about her and their conclusions and hers. And Speckard says something slightly different, but what they both agree on that she is potentially dangerous going forward. So what do? You have a citizen that starts out normal, gets sucked into brainwashing. We can understand that person that was brainwashed, if not exposed to that brainwashing, may have been just an ordinary person. What is it that we need? We are treating her better than we are treating our addicted and homeless. Well, yeah, we treat our refugees better than we do our addicted and homeless. We treat everybody better than our addicted and homeless. I don't know. That's another question altogether, too. What kind of mental illness causes somebody to stay homeless when they could get out of being homeless? That is a whole different issue, and that's one that evades us all the time.
Yeah.
How do we sort of correct whatever's happening? You could even compare it. It's almost like they get lured into drugs. Usually, drugs are with the thing that puts them on the street, and drugs or mental illness gets them into there. But once in there, you find people, it's very, very hard to convince them to get out of that, even if they have the means to get out, because they have enough food and clothes and everything. I mean, there's a guy sleeping at the plaza for a couple of days over there at the corner of Thurlstone and Dorchester. He's right under the sun. Well, he looked well fed, he was well dressed, and he had lots of stuff, and he had all kinds of clothes, and he had a shopping cart, but he looked pretty darn healthy. I passed by him and had a good look at him. He looked pretty darn healthy as he's sleeping there. I'm wondering if that's a kind of a mental illness too.
Yeah,
a kind of a quirk. But this is the strange world we live in, where somebody of completely Western background can get somehow sucked into going over to ISIS and fight for them or serve them. And what they don't know, that the ISIL fighters use them as as fodder in their battles. They push them out in front to see what's going on. If they kill the Westerner, okay, they know what's going where their enemies are.
Yeah. And Chris Simone is saying no one is talking to the homeless.
I think there's lots of people talking to the homeless, and I think it's just one of those issues. It's just is extremely hard to resolve. You've got all kinds of psychology. You've got all kinds of social workers, all kinds of psychiatrists, psychologists, basically, all kinds of volunteers, all that talk to them over and over and over again. It's just we don't have a solution.
Yeah. And, all right. Yeah, we don't have the solution. Dave, you were saying something else.
No, I just said we just don't have a solution. That was my sum up.
Yeah. All right. Moving on. Ford, Trudeau, and Chow all condemned the troubling news that shots were fired outside a North York school for Jewish girls on Yom Kippur. Yeah, I think there's a little bit that I'm not trying to diminish what was said here, but there was gunfire about 4 o'clock in the morning on Saturday morning outside this school, and you know, this is what this article is showing, and the Toronto police are investigating it, and it's apparently the second time this school has been shot at. There was a bullet hole in one of the windows of the school back in May.
Well, this time the school is empty because of Yom Kippur. Gladly, I don't know if the shooter knew that, but well, obviously, I don't think whoever that shooter was. I believe the shooter is the same guy. Obviously, it's the same person that's done that, and I would think that that person they don't tell what kind of slugs it is, but I bet you it's like 9mm or something. I bet you it comes from a handgun because you can't really see a guy driving around with a rifle.
Yeah, there's a picture of a bullet hole, but again, I wouldn't be able to tell from a bullet hole. There's a picture of a bullet hole that hit that school back in May, and you know you can't really tell much about it. It's just a bullet hole, right?
I don't know who the hell this guy is. I think it's a dyed-in-the-wool anti-Semite, to tell you the truth. I don't think it's a Palestinian. I don't think it's anybody like that. I don't think it's anybody that's become radicalized. I think it's a dyed-in-the-wool anti-Semite, to tell you the truth. The old kind of Western anti-Semite that we're more used to. Who's ever doing this? I don't know what they're doing. At one time, I even thought it might be a false flag thing, somebody shooting up the school to draw attention to anti-Semitism, something like that. But I think basically it's just your dyed-in-the-wool anti-Semite. Obviously, the person's got probably a pistol, and he or she has done it twice to a girls' school. First of all, guy, I mean, there's children in there, you fool. I mean, you want to make some kind of big demonstration or something like that. You're shooting into a school where there's children, you idiot.
Yeah.
Well, I don't know what you're trying to say by doing that I am willing to kill children because I'm an anti-Semite. What an idiot. Anyway, I would really like to know who this guy is, and I'd really like to hang him upside down and try to figure out what's in that brain of his. This is the kind of anti-Semitism, I think, that puts Jewish populations at fear for their entire life from day one. From day one, as soon as they're born, they begin to learn that just because they're Jewish, someone's going to take a crack at them. Just because of that. Yeah. There's somewhere that anti-Semitism that began many years ago in Europe and continues to grow or continue to exist. I don't think it grows too much. I don't think too many people are anti-Semitic these days, but there's an element of it, and it has deep roots in Western Christendom. The church held Jews responsible for Jesus's death, and that was kind of like the basis of a lot of anti-Semitism back in the day. And then somehow it became a racist thing. So in Maria Theresa, who was the empress of the Austro-Hungarian Empire, would have a sheet when a Jewish person had to come to talk to her, would have a sheet up between her and that Jewish person, because she felt because he was Jewish, he'd be contaminated. But if that same Jew converted to Christianity, then everything's okay. But then not long after that, there was this racist thing that came along, that they were no longer a different religion, but they were a different people. And their race or their ethnicity was the source of their evilness or whatever. I don't know what the hell that is. But that is the real problem now, basically. But it has its roots in Western Christendom.
Well,
and go ahead.
Yeah, I was going to say this is being looked at by the police gun and gang task force, as well as the hate crime unit.
Well, yeah, I'm pretty sure that somebody had to have a pistol to do that. And too bad there wasn't any cameras in and around there. I guess they're going to have to put some up. I would advise the school to get some cameras so that they can take pictures, and at least they'd be able to identify any kind of truck, or at least be another level of safety. But it's abominable that little girls go to that school and they got to worry about bullets coming through the window.
Yeah.
Where is the, like, who can think of that? We just talked about this Pullman character, and she became radicalized. Maybe she's the type of person that would do something like that. I don't know. But what is it like? I think we're all vulnerable to becoming monsters in a way. In some of us, it just, something triggers in us that enrages us and makes fools out of us, and makes us trot off to join ISIS, or puts a gun in our hand to shoot up a girl's school. I don't know. But all I do know for sure is that these kids will never feel safe. Well, imagine all these little girls having to be worried about passing by a window. Can you imagine that? You're a little girl, right? You're 6, 7 years old, playing around, and you got to go to the playground. And then you got to worry about is anyone got a gun out here that's going to shoot me?
I'm very concerned. I'm very concerned about that. But I also note one thing, that if we didn't have independent schools like this that were of a specific faith, it would be hard to see somebody shooting up if they were all if there was no Catholic schools, no Catholic school board, no independent schools of different faiths, and all under the single school boards. What would happen? Would we have less of a target for this sort of thing?
I wouldn't want to count on it. I don't know. I think that's our perfect right to have religious schools. That's what I don't know. To me, you're talking to the wrong guy. I'm a very secular guy. So these religious schools mean nothing to me. I don't think that in Ontario, the Catholic and public schools should all just be blended together. If you want to teach religion, you teach it in Sunday school or at home. Most of the kids, look, most of the kids I talk to that go to the Catholic school don't know what Immaculate Conception is, and so that's kind of like one of the very most basic things in Catholic faith. And they don't know that they think it's they think it's the conception of Jesus, Immaculate Conception. So you went to religious school your whole life and you don't know the difference. You don't know what Immaculate Conception. So I don't know if religious teaching is really very important at the school level, but that's me. But it says in our Constitution and everything else that you can do these things, and if you can, then you should be safe. I mean, in our country, you should be safe. But there is that odd crackpot, and that's what I'm about. Some fools shooting into it.
Always worries me. It always worries me, that crackpot. Yeah.
And I think this is anyway. The faster we find the dude, the better.
Right. Not a lot of Catholics are joining ISIS, says Peter Baker. Maybe
there are some though. There are some. There are some. There's the Western Canadian boy. I think he was his background was Catholic before he went over to join ISIS in Algeria.
Right. Okay, so Mike Cushman is saying we have police presence in Hamilton schools. 3 teens died in a car accident that were at war with rivals, and also collision on the Lincoln Alexander Parkway left a 15-year-old boy dead, believed to be connected with a series of escalating incidents between students of 2 Hamilton schools.
Oh.
Is this just a school violence, or is this something else?
I don't know. Look at the media. Look at the TV shows that everybody's watching, or the movies and that. It's just chock full of violence. And your hero is the anti-hero. You know, the guy that walks the street and, you know, is witty with his banter, and he's carrying a gun.
Yeah.
Of course, some of this stuff's going to get out of hand. You know, it's just, I know we teach violence every day. So sometimes I think it's just going to pick up. And when you're, and they talked about this gang violence too. I was listening, actually, it was a psychologist or something, but I just happened to be listening from a distance as I was puttering around the house here. And it was the allure of gang violence. You have your peers. You suddenly have power. You are a nobody. You're just one other person. Put a gun in your back pocket, and now you have power. You're with other guys with guns. You have power. You know, you have cred. You make a lot of money turning over dope or selling protection. Now you got money. You got women. You got, you know, your lifespan might be short, but you feel like you're on the top of the hill.
Mm-hmm.
You know, who's going to mess with you, your buddies? I think that's part of the allure.
I also wonder if that's part of the allure about Our Lady with the, you know, who joined ISIS.
I'm not so sure that it can be equated the same. You can understand a kid that's a poor kid, and he's got really nothing to look forward to except mopping the floor because his education's no good, you know. And then he gets a gun, he hangs out with some guys, and they run the streets.
Yeah.
You're on top of, you know, you got a car, you got money, you got, you know. So I don't know. But then the thing, they start shooting one another. Yeah, this idea that violence is good and violence is acceptable, that it is sickening. Our minds have been perverted. I remember a story about an Estonian guy who, during World War II, got grabbed by the Russians, and they were going to force him to be a soldier during World War II. And he's just some regular guy, and he didn't want anything to do with the war one way or another. So they grab him and they drag him off to become a soldier. And the Germans attack and make the whole place confusing. And he's got a rifle, and he wants to get out of the camp, and he's got a rifle, and he needs to get out of there. He wants to escape to get back to Estonia, and he levels his rifle at one of the Russian soldiers, because if he could kill him in all the confusion and then get out that way. But as he puts his gun to the Russian soldier, he says in his mind, I haven't killed anybody yet. I haven't had to kill anybody yet. I'm not going to. He lays down the gun and figures out a different way of getting out of that camp. Now, he did manage to escape the Russian army and get back to Estonia, but that's the kind of mindset there. Nowadays, people kill without second thought, or at least we're shown that every day on TV in our movies.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
When you kill somebody, that's a human life, and people just don't get that. That's a human life. That's the precious thing on earth. And yet we see TV where they're shooting everybody, bang, 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 just people dying willy nilly. It's just, I don't know. I think we're all perverted a bit.
All right.
What else you got, Peter?
Okay. NASA launched a spacecraft towards Jupiter's Europa to see if the ice-covered moon could possibly host life. It's been a fascination by a lot of people for quite some time about Europa and the possibility of life on Europa.
Yeah, for one thing, it's not going to get there until 2030. So it's going to be 6 years before it gets there. And that's going to take about, and it's not going to start doing what it's supposed to be doing until 2031. So you're looking at 6-7 years before we get anything from this. So that's how far away this is. Jupiter takes 6 years to get there with a pretty fast ship. Now, what they're going to do, the reason why they're interested in Europa, because it may be one of the places in our solar system that can sustain life. Right now, what it is, it's a ball basically covered with 25 kilometers of ice. But under that 25 kilometers of ice, they think there's liquid water. And if that liquid water is there, then that may be, you need water, you need energy, you need a source of energy, and you can get life. So they're pretty happy about that. But first of all, they have to explore Europa and figure out what it is and how, it came of interest first when the Galileo probe went up there, back in the 80s, I think it was. And they discovered that this was covered in ice. Now that's water ice. And I don't know if it's, might be salt water, who knows? But whatever it is, it's there. And underneath 25 kilometers of ice, there might be liquid water. And I think that's the main thing that they're looking for. Anytime you have a source of energy, water, and water, you have potential for life. So what they're probably going to do is get there and just make a whole bunch of experiments and everything else. Remember all these things, and then you think, well, why is it worth doing that? Can we spend our money other places? Well, every time you do something like that, you have spin-off technology that gets back into society.
Yeah.
When they have to do something like this, they have to come up with extraordinary solutions to problems they'll face when they send a spacecraft out there. And those solutions,
I have to also wonder about how this probe, whatever it's going to be doing, it's got to be able to survive at very large negative temperatures.
Oh yeah, of course, because for one thing, it's in space. You can't get much colder than that. but it does have an
Yeah, but I
array.
mean, when it lands on the surface, it's
not
still
going to
very
land.
large negative.
It's not
Oh, it's
going to
not
land.
going to land. Yeah. Okay.
Anyway, even on the surface, it won't be any colder than the atmosphere around it. Remember, there's no atmosphere on this little planet, or at least wouldn't be much. I mean, I think it's basically the size of our moon, isn't it? It says something in the article about how big it is. It's not very big.
Yeah,
But it
about
is
90% of our moon's size. Yeah.
Yeah. So
Well, the one thing that's fascinating about Europa is the fact that it's, all that ice. There's also those streaky red lines, which, may well be caused by eruptions of water or whatever onto the surface.
Yeah, maybe, and that they'll be looking for that. They'll be looking for places where water comes from inside and comes out, almost like lava, basically.
Yeah.
Like lava would be on the Earth. It comes out in certain spots, little spots here and there. So they'll be looking for that where water may be working its way out. They're also looking to see if there's an energy source. In Earth, we have an energy source right in the middle of our planet, and that is, of course, the molten core of the planet, which will be hot for another a couple billion years. So that it is radiating heat now. I don't think the moon itself doesn't have something like that. It doesn't have an internal core that's molten, but there may be an energy source on Europa where there's actually warmth, and so they are wondering if so, then they would have the same sort of life that appears in the geothermal vents in at the bottom of the ocean, where it's dark and it's cold, and yet you have life exists. They used to think that you couldn't have life anywhere too far away from the sunlight, but you have life around these geothermal vents that continues with no light at all, and no source of energy from the
Well, there's
sun.
no reason why there can't be life in this. They're talking about 60. They're talking about 60 to 150 kilometers deep of ocean. Is that basically? Do we have like so there must be a reasonable gravity on Europa in order to retain all this on the surface.
Well, gravity is just that thing that exists. Gravity is at work all times in all places. Like you can't escape gravity. So obviously gravity's holding itself together.
Yeah.
That's what holds the Earth together. That's
No,
what
but
holds the
you
moon
see,
together.
the moon is about a fifth of the gravity of Earth. If you remember our moonwalkers who could basically set a golf ball into orbit.
You only need a small amount of gravity to start gathering things up. So obviously Europa, has gravity. Otherwise, it wouldn't
Yeah.
even be there. And
Yeah.
but whatever. In any case, so under the 20 kilometers of ice, is what they think is 60 kilometers of water. That's pretty interesting. That's a very interesting planet, really. Very, very distinct. When you think of other, like I think Titan is made out of mostly methane, has methane seas of methane in it. So it's very, very unusual.
Well, we
We'll
just
see
need
what
to
they come up with. It's just
yeah.
I like to put these things in there because we're also overwhelmed by bad news all the time. You get this weird person, Pullman, who's at risk of being a terrorist. You have some idiot shooting up a little Jewish girls' school. And then now this is a little bit different. This is what we can do when we put our minds together. We can get a probe all the way
I
to
know.
Europa.
I appreciate that's why you put it in.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah, it's interesting. It's the fourth largest of Jupiter's 95 officially recognized moons, 95 moons. It's just a quarter of Earth's diameter, and it has a global ocean of salty liquid water that may contain twice the water of Earth's oceans.
Yeah. As a point of curiosity, the largest moon in the solar system goes around Earth. Earth is what? The fourth largest planet is the inner group of planets, of small planets, and then the big gas giants. So you have Mercury, Venus, Earth, and Mars, and I think Earth is like about the third biggest or something like that. And yet we have the largest moon of any planet in the solar system. That goes for Saturn. It goes for Jupiter, the huge gas giants. It also goes for Uranus and Neptune, the other two huge gas giants. So how is it that we get the biggest moon?
And, we've also got one of the smallest at the moment, but is one that we can't. We've captured this hunk of rock that's that's orbiting us right now.
Oh, well, it's not a moon anyway. It's a sort
of not a moon, but it's for the next 3 months. This thing is going to be orbiting the planet.
Well, welcome. Here's your hat. Where's your hurry? Get out of here. We don't want you crashing into Earth. So this also another thing that this particular craft has to overcome is the magnetic force of Jupiter. Jupiter has, I don't know what, 20,000 times the magnetic force of the Earth.
Yeah.
So this craft has to overcome that. It would just ruin any circuitry or anything else if it had to do anything.
But it's not the first time. It's not the first time that craft have gone through the Jupiter system. So Voyager has gone through. Galileo went through.
Yeah, but these have much more. Have to be insulated much more because of the experiments that the probe's going to do. So it does, in the article, it talks about insulating the functioning, the sophisticated electronics from this incredible magnetic field. So that's just something to think about as well.
Yeah. Yeah, and as I said, has to work incredibly cold temperatures, just to monitor that.
Yeah.
All right. Moving on. I haven't got any comments from that. Okay, Ukrainian military recruiters are raiding bars and restaurants looking for men for conscription purposes.
Yeah, that's right now in Ukraine. They don't have enough men, obviously. This is a war of attrition with Russia. If Russia loses 2 people and Ukraine loses 2 people on the battlefield, Russia can replace them. The Ukraine can only replace one of them. So this war is a continuing bloodbath. It should never have started. I'm going to put that right then and there. The West could have stopped this from happening. They did not. The fools. In any case, now we have one of these forever wars going on. And what's happening is the Ukraine is running out of men. They're running out of men fast. So they dropped the conscription age. So they're going to conscript anybody they can. They're dropping the qualifications. You could get exemptions if you were going to university or something like that, because of course the country's going to need educated people afterwards. But those exemptions are being dropped. So if you're going to university, they're going to put a uniform on you and send you up. They're going to start training you. What's happening is thousands and thousands of Ukrainian men have ran from the country, took off. That's the same in Russia too, by the way. I think they had something like 700,000 guys trying to get out of the country early on in the war. But the Russians are emptying their prisons and grabbing everybody they possibly can, conscripting them. but the Ukrainians cannot keep up. Sooner or later, if this war wants to continue on, like we keep saying in the West, we got to wait. We got to wait till Ukraine gets all its territory back. That's unrealistic, because then we were going to have to supply the manpower. Sooner or later, we're going to have to put mercenaries in there, and they'll be sponsored by the West, or we're going to have to put our own people on boots on the ground, basically, to assist the Ukrainians. This could get right out of. Go ahead.
Well, just to show how bad this has gotten, the military descended upon Kiev's Palace of Sports venue after a concert Friday night by Ukrainian rock band Okean Elzy. And basically what happened is when they were letting people out, they were grabbing men. At the exit.
Yeah, and that's what they're doing in bars and concerts and everything else like that, any kind of venue. So the police start showing up and checking the guys to make sure that they have their draft cards, and they're going to ask them, how come you're not in a uniform? It's getting very strict right now. Yeah, if you want to live in Ukraine, you're going to have to put on a soldier's uniform and get to the front. Even if you're a woman, they're going to have, hopefully they'll have behind the front work for the women, because I don't believe women should be a frontline soldiers at all. I just don't. I think it's we need women. Yeah, in our society, I think was a step backwards, putting guns into women's hands and sending them to war. But in any case, I can't see anything happening here that's good for the Ukraine. They're losing people hand over fist. It is one big bloodbath that should never have happened, and it's still happening. And people are making vast amounts of money on this war. The amount of munitions that are being pumped out of the United States and Britain and everywhere else are making money for a select group of people, which really bothers me a lot. This is driving the military industrial system, and it just bothers me incredibly. But we cannot. This is telling us, like, if the Ukrainian military are going around and fleecing bars and concerts and finding anyone who's somehow dodged a draft, forcing them into a uniform, that tells me they don't have enough men, and they're losing their men hand over fist. Young men are dying. You don't want your young men to die. That is your future. And yet no one has come across and tried to figure out a solution that will save the lives of countless young men. It's just dumb. In the meantime, I expect that there's a lot of Ukrainian refugees in Canada right now. How many of those refugees are going to have to, someone's going to come knocking on their door and say, you better get back to Ukraine. Here's your gun. Go get over there and get shot. It has to stop. The whole thing has to stop. There's just no way around this. And if it keeps going the way it is, Ukraine will not have enough men to fight the war. If they don't have enough men to fight the war, they're going to have to get them from somewhere else. And that somewhere else is going to be mercenaries. It's going to be NATO. It's going to be volunteer units, whatever. They're going to have to fill up their military. And what I worry about the most is they're going to start putting in mercenaries like what was it? Blackwater did the mercenary work in Iraq for the U.S. Army. I mean, that's what's going to happen next. Who's going to pay for it?
Currently, all Ukrainian men 25 to 60 are eligible for conscription, and men 18 to 60 are not allowed to leave the country.
Yeah. I mean, a lot of them got out ahead of time, and the same thing's happening in Russia. They're looking for anybody to put up, they're emptying their prisons. I mean, that's what the Wagner group did. That's how the Wagner group it got its people. They emptied out prisons. They said, look, you can get out of prison and you can come fight with us. Well, you're asking guys that are criminals. A lot of those guys are just natural born criminals. Can you imagine what they're going to be doing out on the field?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Oh, I know.
The fact of the matter is that the Ukraine is just being bled dry of its young men. And the same thing is happening in Russia, but they have more to bleed. And this war cannot continue unless there are people to fight the war. And you can't keep fighting a war like that. You can't.
Yeah.
Without men. And where are you going to get it? Are you going to get them from NATO? You can't do that. That's a major war you start right there. So what they're going to do is, in my estimation, they're going to find ways of getting mercenaries in there, which will just extend the war even longer.
Yeah.
The war that should never started in the first place.
I've got no comments upon that, but I think we'll have to leave it at that point.
Yep. Okay, everyone. It's time to go. And without further ado, I bid you adieu. Pray